Thanks for everyone for coming up. My name is Christopher Boucher. I'm the VP of Hockey and Operations at SportLogic.
Matt Perri, Director of Hockey Ops here.
So first off, I just want to thank everybody for coming in and viewing what we're doing. Hopefully we can give you some information. This is going to be very broad. This isn't going to be too specific. We're not going to go down too much of a rabbit hole, or try not to anyways. And we're going to try to touch upon what most people would like to know about us, and a little bit about the data set, obviously, as much as possible. So I'm hoping that by being as broad as possible, we're able to hit on as many things as possible and interest as many people as possible. So that's really the goal here. So if your expectations are a huge deep dive into detailed data analytics, we might not get that deep, but obviously that's part of what we do.
Not a lot of models in this talk. We'll keep it broad. All right, so we'll just jump into the presentation here. All right, so connecting the dots.
So we're going to talk about what is our data set. So what exactly does our data do? And actually, I'll let Matt jump in and go over that with you guys.
So we take events, as we call them. An event can be a pass, a shot, stick check, loose puck recovery, whatever it might be. The actions that have to do with possession in the game. And we take all these things at the outcome level and we type them by context. So it's not just saying a pass occurred. We take failed passes. We take them at the attempt level, so we know if it was successful. We know if it was failed. We know if it was attempt to be an outlet pass, whether it was a D-to-D pass, an O-zone east-west pass, or pass to the slot, pass off the rush. Everything is typed so we know what was attempted to be done there. We also, everything is typed at many levels. So you can have a successful dump in that was a rim. You can have a successful dump in that was a cross ice. You can have a successful pass that was off the rush and also off controlled entry. Everything is related, and you can look at these sequences of events to get larger plays. You can look at counts of events or rates to get metrics. It's really just the most granular hockey data that exists anywhere.
Yeah, and that's the key point is how granular. It's really about capturing as much information about the game as possible. And then obviously, like Matt mentioned, in terms of increased granularity by the types of certain things. So when, while you could just have this is a dump in, this isn't a dump in, what our data set can tell you what type of dump in it is, like Matt mentioned, in terms of a cross ice dump in or a rim dump in. And from there, by extension, obviously, and we'll get into this a little bit later, you're actually able to look at team strengths and weaknesses based on these specific things. So obviously we talked about NHL teams. So we have 30 NHL teams that currently use our data. We have 24 American Hockey League teams that use our data, all of the SHL. Multiple junior teams, and then we have a couple of national teams as well that use our data. And that's kind of what how the data is being used, or sorry, who's using the data right now.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to get into the?
Yeah, the way teams tend to use our data, it's really wide ranging. You can use it for postgame analysis, pre-game evaluation of your opponent, video scouting for players, your own team evaluation, player evaluation for signings, trades, all that stuff.
Yeah. So if we're looking at a pre-game report. So what would that be? So that could be, because our system also allows users to create video and play clips, play clips. They're able to actually create their pre-scout directly within our UI. So this could be anything from a power play system or power play entries, face-offs, power play face-offs. Obviously, there's always data attached to that too. So in a pregame, you could do that. Combine that with team strength and weaknesses based on the data. So if you're looking at, like we were talking about earlier, in terms of let's say a dump in, you can actually see what the other teams maybe their weaknesses are on preventing entries against. Maybe they struggle on dump ins when they're rim dump ins. Maybe they struggle on soft dump ins. Just as an example, maybe they struggle when there's quick ups on regroups. All this stuff is kind of coming through the pregame report. When we look at the postgame report, obviously it's the same thing, but after the game. So you can start looking at what happened during the game. Why did we have success? Why didn't we have success? Why did the other team outplay us? And you actually do that through stretches of the game as well. Being able to tell exactly what they did and what you did, and then being able to turn that into actionable data. And all this is really about actionable data. I spoke about the video scouting, obviously. So the video scouting at the team level, obviously at the player level as well. Being able to look at players' shifts, being able to look at players' events. So let's say if you're doing some scouting on a defenseman and you want to look at, let's say, how they defend, you can actually look at all of their entries against to see are they engaging players at the top of the circles? Are they engaging players in the neutral zone? Are they backing off? Are they able to get around? How's their footwork? How are their turns? How's their edge work? All that stuff can be done as well right through there, and really at the event level. How the players are doing in the offensive zone. You can look at each and every one of a player's puck touches in the offensive zone. So when I'm looking at, let's say, an offensive player, I'm going to be looking at every single one of their offensive plays in the offensive zone with the puck, being able to look at what they do, how they protect the puck, how they control, how they create. And then obviously that slides into player evaluation, and then trades and free agent signing. All this is part of that whole package. So that's kind of how teams are using it. I know it seems a little broad and vague, but we want to be able to touch upon as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. So Chris touched upon some of this. Two basic ways to look at it is team evaluation and player evaluation.
Yeah. So if we're looking at the team level, team's ability to create chances, limit chances against, all this can be pulled from the data. If you're looking at team's ability to create ozone possession time and limit that as well, manage the puck effectively all zones and produce on the power play. That's kind of the main things. So if we're looking at something like creating scoring chances, what we can do is look at how things are being done. And that's really the goal of this, is to turn this into actionable things. So when you're creating scoring chances, what are you doing? Creating scoring chances is about getting pucks to the middle of the ice. So that could be a pass to the slot, a walk to the slot, off the rush, your shots, outside shots with rebounds, your rebound recoveries. See, they're kind of the main things of being able to create scoring chances, and obviously, inversely, being able to do that again. So, are you boxing players out? Are you blocking shots? Are you fronting?
Denying entries.
Denying entries, obviously, for OZO Times. These are kind of things that all kind of tie together and are the kind of the foundation of that. We'll get into those foundations a little bit deeper later, but that's kind of what we're trying to get to.
Yeah, and at the player level, it's the same thing. What actions contribute to generating offense, ozone possession time, moving the puck up ice, keeping possession, and getting it back?
Yep.
So I think we'll start diving into the team level. Chris mentioned some of these things already. Generating ozone time, creating scoring chances, limiting time against, and limiting chances against. And what helps you do those things? And then how do you play with pace? How do you effectively manage the puck?
We'll start with creating OZO time. So what helps you create OZO time? So OZO time is really about 5 main things, and these things are kind of touching upon that. So it's really about how much time you have, or how many possessions you get in the offensive zone. Obviously, that's how you produce puck. And just to be clear, we're talking about puck on stick, ozone possession time. So how do you get possession in the offensive zone? Well, it's your dump in forecheck, right? So your dump in forecheck. How are you when you dump it in? What's your dump in forecheck success rate? What's your dump in forecheck? What's your dump in rate? Then you can get into, let's say, your ozone turnover rate. So do you turn the puck over? Are you not turning the puck over? The less you turn the puck over, you get more ozone possession time. Face-off wins. Obviously, one main way of getting possession in the offensive zone is by winning more face-offs. Another thing is your controlled entries. So are you getting clean entries? What's happening with your clean entries? Are you creating cycles? Are you getting scoring chances? Are you getting shots off your controlled entries? It's just some of the ways. And the other main one is your shot recoveries. So what we call your second chance opportunities. Rebound, it's similar to what you see in basketball in terms of rebounds, right? You're getting your second chance opportunities. So that's another thing that we can look at in terms of being able to create ozone possession time.
Mm-hmm. And when picking up the puck, it's important to know what was the context around it, right? So you can look at those metrics. You can look at your dump in recoveries, forecheck recoveries, missed shot recoveries, all of that, and let you know what you're doing after and how you're doing in those measures.
Yeah, and the data set is set up in a certain way so that it's looking at different things. So let's say if we're looking at a team's number of dump in recoveries they have in the offensive zone, right? So that's a rate thing. So there's just a number. But if your dump in rate is high, obviously you're going to have more dump in recoveries, right? Just because you're dumping the puck in, you're going to have more. That's measuring one thing. That's not measuring your effectiveness of your forecheck. That's why we can actually have a success rate of your dump in. So saying when you dump the puck in, what's your ability to get that puck back? What's your recovery rate? And that's really about your forechecking. So it's important to distinguish those things, and that's why there's so much granularity, because you may think it's one thing, but it's actually multiple things. One thing is just measuring how often you get the puck. The other thing is actually looking at the effectiveness of your forecheck.
Mm-hmm. And because we take literally every possession play, your turnover rate or your takeaway rate is really your complete rate of giving away the puck or getting the puck back.
Yep. So looking at generating offense, how do you generate offense? What's the main thing you're trying to do when you're generating offense? Obviously, you're trying to get the puck to the slot, you're trying to get the puck to the inner slot, and you're trying to get shots on net. So those are the things we're trying to look at. So obviously, one of those things could be passing the puck to the slot driving plays. Like these are things that I mentioned earlier, shots, and then your rebound recovery. Your ability to create off the rush. Obviously, when you're creating off the rush, there's fewer players. There's fewer players in the lane. There's a better chance of creating a better chance. These are some of the things that help make up, or the main things that help make up creating offense or getting scoring chances.
And all these things they're quite literally kind of the opposite when you think against, when you're thinking about limiting chances against. For instance, you might be a team that generates a lot off the rush, but if your rush defense and your rush goaltending is very poor, odd man rushes tend to create odd man rushes against. So you really want to look at the whole picture there and know, what is my team identity? Am I a team that wants to create off the rush, off rebounds, off O-zone plays in the cycle, off forecheck? Yeah. Are we a heavy team and we want to be off the forecheck? Are we a heavy team in our own zone and we want to limit off the forecheck against? Everything, all the scoring chances are typed and shots are typed that way. And
this all lines up to those pre-scout reports, right? You're able to see what other teams are doing. So if you're playing against a team that creates a lot off the rush, or you're playing against a team that creates a lot off the cycle, you can actually start looking at how you want to face those, or maybe some adjustments you want to make, or even for your own self-evaluation as a team. If you're a team that's completely struggling creating off the rush, then in the data, you'll be able to find the data points that kind of point to why that is. And it could be systems, it could be player related, it could be anything. It could be score effects. All of these things can be taken into account, but the data is there to find that information.
Are we doing what we want to do in the first place, and should we be? So I'll talk about our expected goals model for a while. We find the simplest, most effective way to measure total offense created for or allowed against, whether at the team or the player level, is our expected goal model. There are a lot of public expected goal models, and they all do quite well at predicting future goals, better than other measures, shots and possession, stuff like that. Our model is better because we have everything. We have all the play leading up to the shot. So a feature for our model that it would have learned on its own looking at just the raw data is, say, proximity and angle shot to the net. That's something that's already captured in public models. Obviously, a shot from in tight, from a good angle in front of the net is going to have a higher value, a higher percentage of being a goal than a point shot from outside. But what we can put into the model that other models don't have is the play leading up to the shot. So the angle change and the speed of the play leading up to the shot. Was it a seam pass, a low to high play? Was it a rebound that went to the far side of the ice? And for the speed, was it a one-timer, deflection, a broken play in front that the goalie didn't have time to react to? A lot of this stuff is pretty much all related to how easy it is for the goalie to make the save. And then the context of the play. Was the play off a 2-on-1 rush, a breakaway? Was it off a cycle chance? Was it kind of a low percentage play that happened to just go in? You can know that stuff. The location of defenders, so you can know how open the shot was. Was it screen? Was it highly pressured? Was it contested? All these things are plugged into the model. It's not, just a binary flag. It, say was an open shot or it wasn't. A lot of these are continuous measures. So it's all combined into a complicated array of features, and it spits out a value. And the value is very, very good predicting future.
And the main goal with our model is really about goaltender movement, right? We're trying to get as much information about the goalie movement, so pre-shot movement. So that's from a former goalie standpoint, that's really cool and important, because you're able to look at whether or not a goalie has time to react, time to square up, time to be in the right position, or whether or not they're moving. Obviously, a goalie who's moving is less likely to make the save than a goalie who has time to set up and get squared to the shooter.
Absolutely. And then when you have an effective expected goal model, you can make inferences based on it. So a quick way to look at a post-game analysis is, how much offense did we create? How much offense did we give up? That's literally just your even strength expected goals for, even strength expected goals against. You can always split it by even strength and power play to know which one played more of a factor in a game or a set of games. And then you can use the difference between goals and actual goals to tell you, were we lucky in this game on our chances? Were we finishing well? If you have more goals than expected, you were finishing or you got lucky. And then conversely against, if we let in fewer goals than a model expected, then we got good goaltending in that game. And conversely, we might not have had good goaltending if we let in more goals than expected.
Yeah, these are like your umbrella categories to tell you really think of it as you're going into this, you're saying, why did we win this game? Why did we lose this game? And you're going through each of those things. So if at even strength, we outproduced our opposition at even strength, means we had an higher expected goals than they did. That tells you one thing. If you lost that game, then the next question is going to be, why did we outproduce the other team at even strength and we lost the game? So there could be many factors. Could be goaltending. Could be you guys had trouble finishing. It could go down to your special teams. Maybe it was a power play issue. Maybe it was a penalty kill issue. But think of it as kind of your entry points to be able to determine what happened in that game. And obviously you want to start with that to know whether or not you outproduced or were outproduced at even strength.
And then you can walk it back from there. If you know an issue was offense creation, then you want to look at the things that lead to offense. Exactly. Ozone possession, creating scoring chances, the stuff we talked about.
Yep.
Another application is you can look at what you're doing well when you're outchancing your opposition and what you're doing well or poorly when you're outchanced. So in periods of time when the opposition is getting more chances and better chances than you are, how do you average in a particular metric? Some things are quite obvious, like when you're out-chancing the opposition, you're almost certainly going to have more inner slot shots. Those are just shots from the high danger area. Slot driving plays, moving it to the middle of the ice, recovering rebounds. Some things are a little bit more nuanced. Some teams say odd man rushes against, probably odd man rushes are dangerous, but if you're a team that knows that you can outproduce more on the rush, even though while you're giving against, it's still something you might be comfortable with. You just want to be aware of it.
Yeah, and this is also used as a function of knowing what do we do well when we have success, what do we struggle with when we're not doing well. So if I look at all the games where my team has success, and I see that these are some of the main things that are important, in the games that I have success, I get this many more clean entries. I recover the puck this much more. I get this many second. At least it's allowing you to kind of see what are our strengths, what's important to us to have success, and obviously on the inverse of that, when we're struggling, what are we not doing well? It could be that you're giving up a lot of second chance opportunities, rebound chances. So then, okay, now we got to look at our ability to box out, or maybe our forwards aren't blocking shots, or maybe we're allowing teams to funnel too easily. All of this is information, and again, all the goal here is always to get to actionable data. We're using the data to get the actionable data, which is information, and then use that information to change things or to make adjustments. I bring that into our practices, our pregame prep. This is the goal here.
Mm-hmm. And you can know, using this tool, you can know what is a general league trend. Obviously, more shots from high danger leads to more chances. But then what is a team-specific trend? What are we specifically affected? How do we deviate from the average in which metrics?
Yeah, absolutely. So here we're talking about transit. Well, we're talking about giveaways and takeaways. So certain things that are giveaways, and I'll kind of just explain what they are first, and then I can get into kind of how we go from there. So a giveaway would be any time that you turn the puck over. So you can turn the puck over with a failed pass, a failed puck protection. So you're trying to shield the puck. You dump in and you turn the puck over there. You turn the puck over on a controlled entry. Obviously, ways to take away are blocked passes, stick checks, blue line holds, denied entries. So those are ways to take it away. But when we get into a takeaway or a giveaway rate, what we're actually looking at is the other team recovers that puck, right? So you can have a failed pass, but you can recover it. So let's say it's failed stretch pass, but you have your forwards flying. He recovers the puck in the offensive zone. Yes, that's a failed play, but it's not a giveaway, right? You didn't turn the puck over. So it's important to kind of show those different aspects of the data and what exactly it means.
And we're able to do that because the data is tagged so granularly. So if I'm a team and I want to know how many giveaways did a player have in that pucks that or plays that created a loose puck, even if my teammate recovered it, if I want to penalize that player or that play or think of it negatively, I can. If I only want to look at it where if the team recovers, the opposite team recovers, then it can be available as well.
So it's really, you can almost customize what you feel is a certain thing, right? So if you want, like Matt was saying, if you want to punish a player for failed passes, even if they don't turn into turnovers, well, you have that information. You don't have to just use the turnover rate or the giveaway rate. You can actually use just failed passes and your passing success rates.
Mm-hmm. And all of these plays the information is available at the zone level, at the context level. So you can't just look at, say, overall turnovers and then dive into that. But what we allow you to do is know a player's turning over the puck off their dump and recoveries, or they don't have an exit rate that's very good off their dump and recoveries. Or in the neutral zone, say they're carrying it out of the zone quite often, but they're turning it over there, trying risky east-west passes, or they're trying to go one-on-one on a player. When they're entering the zone, maybe they've got a lot of controlled entries, but they're always giving away on the next play right after. So in effect, it's a useless play.
Yeah, so I can kind of walk you through how you would use this from, so let's say you look at your team and you're saying that we're giving up a lot of odd man rushes against, right? That's information that you have. We know that we're giving up a lot of odd man rushes. We're going to look at video. We're going to determine what we're doing, but there's also a way to get that information from data to actually help with the video as well. So you could be turning the puck over on your entries. You could be forcing entries and you're turning the puck over there. We can get that information, even look at what percentage of those turnovers in that area are resulting in controlled entries against or scoring chances against, right? Maybe you're turning the puck over because you're turning the puck over in the high in the offensive zone, in the opposition's defensive zone, which is something that happens a lot, which is, I think, is something that's been under noticed.
Yes.
Is how those high ozone turnovers are resulting in so many of the odd man rushes. Many of the teams that are giving up a lot of odd man rushes are turning the puck over high in the offensive zone. I think a lot of people think it's in the defensive zone or it's in the neutral zone. It really is high ozone turnovers. And those could be off of entries, but those are also off of low to high plays, which are a huge increase in the league now, is those low to high plays with defensemen trying to get the pucks through or walk the line, so on and so forth.
Absolutely. Chris kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but we'll go into a little bit more detail. As a pre-scout tool, it's important to know what do we do well, what does our opposition do poorly, and vice versa. What have we been doing poorly, and what do they do well? What we like to look at is matching those things specifically. So, for instance, if my team is generating a lot off the rush, and we're playing a team that gives up a lot off the rush, that's an automatic imbalance that we can take advantage of. And if I'm the other team, it's giving me information to know, okay, we're going to need to put a little bit more focus on here for, say, our practice or per game, whatever, to make sure that we're putting more attention on not allowing off the rush. And everything is linked in an opposite sense. So if your D-zone turnover rate is high and the opposition's O-zone takeaway rate is high, they're going to be linked, and you can instantly kind of look at that and make quick decisions and quick inferences.
Yeah, and this information is really useful, and really when you do the kind of the smell test on it, and you look at going into a game and saying, okay, these are this team's strengths and these are this team's weaknesses. It's incredible how often those actually end up coming to fruition and showing up in the post-game report, or even when you're watching the game. Digging in even deeper into that in terms of goaltending is you can actually look at goaltending strengths and weaknesses and match those up against certain teams. So if you're a team that creates a lot low to high with let's say from below the goal line, you pass to the slot one time, or if you do that a lot, and we can see that the goalie you're playing struggles with that, because we do have the sample size and the data set to get enough of that information to know a little bit more about that, then obviously that's something you want to look at. If you're looking at a goalie that struggles with east-west, east-west, and with a one-timer, or let's say deflections or whatever it might be, you're actually able to match those things up as well. And we can pull that information and get that information at the goaltending level as well. We're actually looking at what goalie's strengths and weaknesses are, even to the point where you're looking at whether a goalie moves better left to right or right to left.
Yeah.
So it's that much detail and that much information you can get.
Yeah, especially, you're looking on the power play, where do we want to move the puck, where do we want to be shooting from? Yeah. That's super good to know.
And you just notice that when you look at goalies that you would think have struggled sealing the post when they go laterally, those are the goalies. Those are the goalies that show up here.
Moving on. So we'll move on to special teams stuff. A lot of the power play metrics that you should be focusing on line up pretty much almost exactly with just O-zone possession time and generating offense. It's the same idea, obviously. You want to focus a little bit more on your power play breakouts. Your success rate should be much higher than even strength, obviously. You can break this down at the player. Know which player do we want to be entering with control? Yeah. Where do we want to be making our bump back? Do we want to be doing it to the D zone? Do we want to keep it in the neutral zone? Do we want to do a same side breakout? What is our percent? What's our success rate? And all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So think of this as what we talked about in terms of your establishing ozone possession time and then creating chances. This is at the power play. It's the same thing. The first thing you want to be doing is creating ozone possession. So obviously you want to be winning that first faceoff. If you don't do that, then what's the next thing? Well, then you're looking at your controlled entry success rate, right? And so if you're looking at a team, you're saying, okay, why does this team not have success on the power play? The first thing you're going to figure out is, do they spend enough time in the offensive zone? If they don't, well, then now you have to dig into there. So then maybe it is faceoffs, maybe it is your entries, maybe it is your turnovers, going from there. If that's not the issue, if they are getting a lot of ozone time and they're not creating, then now you start looking at what are they doing. So then again, it could be, are they turning the puck over, or are they not getting shots through? Are they not getting traffic? Are they not getting screenshots? Are they not recovering rebounds? Or are they not moving to the middle? So that's kind of how you get through, and that's how the data is set up, so that you have a situation or an issue or something you want to look at, and you go through each of these levels of granularity to find the information that you're looking for, and then make that actionable.
Yeah. And then on the flip side, being an effective penalty kill team, it's just denying everything that makes you a good ozone possession team on the power play.
Yeah, and this is one of my things that I'm sure Matt's sick of me mentioning, because I tend to mention the same things, is just what's important on the PK, right? There's always this focus on shot blockers, right? And shot blocking is important, but I think more important than that is your ability to kill plays, whether or not that's by blocking shots or with good sticks or whatever it is, recover pucks and dump the puck out. Those are what you should be looking at for your penalty killers. That mobility. If you just have shot blockers, you're going to block a lot of shots, but you're going to spend a lot of time defending. If you have guys that are a little bit more mobile and can block shots, that's what you should be looking at. Guys who can block shots or kill plays, recover pucks, and obviously dump the puck out. And I think that's an undervalued A skill set is just the ability to actually get the puck out of the zone. You see it a lot, especially with some forwards where they just struggle, or they're on their backhand, or they don't know what to do. But if you have guys who can recover those pucks and just get those pucks down the ice, that's what you're trying to do. Even it's in the name, right? And again, I mentioned this a lot, but you're killing penalty, you're killing time. Your whole goal here is to kill time. The best way to kill time is to not be in your zone.
Absolutely. So I think that's the end of our team evaluation section. We'll move on to player evaluation.
Cool. So player evaluation for us. So there's a lot of talk about a one number system, and not that we're against that or we don't feel there's value. We feel that we're looking at information that's a little bit more actionable when you're trying to acquire players or evaluate players, right? So when you're trying to evaluate players, a one number system can give you information and can help you, but we want to look at it a little bit deeper. So what we try to focus on are 5 pillar players, and 5 pillar players really are about being able to do certain things really, really well. Not every player does everything really well. That's a really rare thing. There are players who do. But that just doesn't happen. So the 5 pillars that we're looking for is your ability to create offense. So offense during plays. Can you get the puck to the middle? Do you get shots from the inner slot? Do you create offense, right? That's really what we're looking at. And we look at that blue line in and players' ability to get pucks to the middle of the ice, get shots on net, recover rebound, so on and so forth. The next thing we want to look at is, do you drive possession? Are you able to move the puck up ice with possession? So that's an important facet. Obviously, and that looks at any play where the player is moving the puck up ice with possession. And I'll go through this, and Matt can kind of go into a little bit of what each one of these ones are. Defensive touches. So are you killing plays, right? If you're looking at a player who can defend, right? Are you killing plays? So do you have a strong stick? Are you blocking passes? Are you in lanes? Are you shutting down shooting lanes? Are you shutting down passing lanes? Loose puck recoveries, your ability to get loose puck recoveries. And kind of a nice addition to being able, when we look at loose puck recoveries, you start looking at players who not only are good skaters, but also see the game a little bit better, can adjust on the fly and get the pucks first, right? So that's loose puck recoveries are important. And then overall rating is really just simply your impact on your team's ability to acquire and maintain puck possession. So really what it's looking at is how many more, it's very simple, how many more successful plays than failed plays is that player contributing prorated. So the higher that is, the more impact that player is having on the game and on your ability to acquire and maintain possession.
Yeah, and then some additional things you can look at is their share of offense on ice. So of the total offense generating plays while you're on the ice, are you responsible for 20% of them, 35% of them? And this will tell you another way if a player is driving play. And then you always want to, we'll touch on this a little later, but you always want to check it against context. If they're starting all their shifts in the D zone, if they're playing against much tougher players than they're playing with, then you would expect some of their offense production to be lower or their possession to be lower.
That outproducing usage can't be overstated. That's the magic pill. That's the magic bean. Sorry, that's what you're trying to do when you're doing player evaluation. You're trying to find those players who are outproducing their usage, because if they get better usage, they should be giving you better production.
Absolutely. And the players that can outplay their usage are the gems.
Yep, those are the ones you're looking for.
Cool. And we'll touch on that a little more. So we'll start with offense generating plays and possession driving plays.
Yeah, so offense generating plays, it's about being able to get pucks to the middle. So the things that we look at on there is a player's ability to pass the puck to the slot. And I've touched upon this over and over again, but we'll just go over it one more time. Pass the puck to the slot, skate the puck to the slot, recover rebounds in the slot, get shots on net from the inner slot, get shots on net from the slot. Those are kind of your main points for your offense generating plays. There's other things that go in terms of your ability to make passes for one-timers or get one-timers. Your ability when you shoot from the outside, that those shots actually become rebounds and are not just dead plays. That's kind of some of the stuff on the offensive generating plays.
Yeah, playing off the rush, stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And then possession driving plays, like Chris mentioned earlier, it's literally plays that move the puck from either, D zone, neutral zone, O zone, or even just further north within the D zone, right? Yeah. So your outlet passes, your stretch passes in the D zone, your line carries, all line carries, north, east-west passes in the neutral zone. We find that east-west passes in the neutral zone are a big contributor to creating odd man rushes.
Yeah.
Also turnovers.
And
then controlled entries, of course.
Yeah. So think of possession driving plays. Think of it as anything that moves the puck forward, like Matt said, with possession. So obviously you're excluding your dump outs and your dump ins, because normally when you're dumping the puck out and you're dumping the puck in, you're not maintaining possession, right? We really want to look at players that move the puck up ice with possession. Roman Josi is the player that should come to everybody's mind when we think about possession driving plays.
So we're going to show some examples. First, we'll start with offense generating plays. This is NHL players from this season, minimum 200 minutes played.
Yeah. So go ahead.
So, I mean, the list, I think, speaks for itself. Is literally just counting the plays that Chris was mentioning and prorating them for 20 minutes. So you can see the forwards and the defense. Malkin is just having an unbelievable season this year. I thought he was going to, we were looking at these numbers. He's been top of the ranking all year. I thought he was going to dip a little bit.
But he's still up there.
Yeah, it's all through passing. You can see he's just another passer this year. And then your Connor McDavid's, McKinnon's, Crosby's, I think that's quite obvious. Gallagher also had a great year.
So the reason why I wanted to show the list is so that people can understand what it's trying to tell us. What this metric is trying to tell us is who are the best offensive players in terms of being able to create scoring chances. That's really what we're trying to do. And so we're not just looking at when they shoot. We're not just looking at when they pass. We're looking at all of these things together to determine which players are producing the most offense for your team. And obviously, the reason why we show this is the smell test. You want to be able to see that this makes sense. You're not seeing. I'm not going to insult any player specifically. You're not seeing a certain player that just doesn't belong there in that list. And what we do a lot of times when we're showing this to teams and we're going over teams, the first thing they want to look at is who the top players are, and the next thing they want to look at is who are the bottom players, because obviously they want to see if it passes the smell test there too, and it does.
This is where we sign contracts.
Yeah.
And then same ranking, but for possession driving plays.
Yeah, again, I mean, these are players that you would expect to be driving the puck up ice. Again, moving the puck with possession. Again, Roman Josi, like I mentioned, Carlson, obviously. There's a few surprises up there. I hope that there's a few surprises up there because that means that there's value there as well, right? If it was just players you expect, then maybe the value isn't there as a tool. But if you see players that you wouldn't expect, and we see, I think there's a player at number 6 on the defensive side that people might be surprised that's there. But obviously, this is information that helps you determine or helps you evaluate players a little bit more in depth.
He's going to show up in another list too, one that's a little bit more expected. And then if you want to, you can always break this down further. There are a few ways that you can contribute to possession driving, moving it up ice. You can be an elite passer. You can be an elite carrier of the puck. So you can always break down these metrics into their components if you're really wanting to find out why that is. Moving on to some of the other 5 pillars: defensive touches and loose puck recoveries.
Yeah, so I talked a bit about it already, but defensive touches, but think of it as kills, right? Well, I think that's a terminology that's used a little bit more than defensive touches, is kills. So you can kill a play with a stick check. You can kill a play by knocking a player off the puck with a body check. You can kill a play by blocking a pass. You can kill a play by blocking a shot. So these are all ways that you can kill a play. And by killing a play, what we mean is you end the cycle of possession of the opponent, at least for that time. Who recovers the puck is a whole little thing, and that actually slides us into loose puck recoveries, right? Loose puck recoveries is really about being able to get the puck, and so is get possession of the puck, right? I think there's a misconception sometimes that the puck is in possession of someone most times, but the puck is actually not in possession about obviously a third of the game, where the puck nobody has possession. And being able to recover those pucks, being first on puck and recover those pucks, obviously has a huge impact on your ability to have the puck, maintain possession.
Yeah, and then we can look at some rankings here. Some of this is a little bit less intuitive because there have not really been statistics for this stuff in the past. Yeah. But obviously, defensive forwards, Bergeron, Koivu, they show up at the top.
Yeah.
But then other players who you might not expect to be involved in separating the opposition with the puck, like Hughes, De La Rose, for instance, they're up there.
Yeah, for sure. And what you're going to see, and this is one of those things we use to evaluate defensive forwards, obviously. There's other things which we'll get to a little bit later, but obviously your ability to kill plays is a huge thing. That's why when you see players like Bergeron and Koivu who are consistently there year over year over year, even a player like De La Rose and Barkov are consistently there year over year. These are guys who just kill plays, all right? De La Rose, obviously he's not going to give you anything on the offensive side, but in terms of having a player who just kills plays, he consistently, even from his days in Montreal, was a consistently high producer of that. And obviously some guys like Eriksson Ek, who play some really tough minutes, being able to see him there tells you a little bit about what he can bring to a team as well.
Yeah. And as we go through these kind of the ladder of the 5 pillars, you'll notice the first 2 offensive generating plays and possession driving plays. They're just elite players no matter what. Yeah. Then you would also look, do they have a lot of defensive touches? Do they have a lot of LPRs?
Yeah.
But you're going to find a lot of players who are really good at picking up the puck that might not be so good at other things as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So if we
just touch upon the defenseman, and we're going to see this a little with the when you're looking at it forwards, obviously it's a little bit more easy to understand, but there's also some potholes or some things you need to be careful when you're looking at defensemen. There's going to be defensemen that are high on D touches or kills, but it's also because they spend a lot of time in their defensive zone. So this allows me to kind of get into that thing where now you can't just use one metric to determine whether a player is a good player or a bad player. I hate that term, but that term, it's really, you want to look at this and think about the context of that player. And that's why the other metrics, the other events, the other information we have will help you do that. So there's certain players that are there, they're really high on their defensive touches, but it's because they're spending a lot of time in their defensive zone.
You can say something similar about loose puck recoveries for certain players who have a lot of them.
Yeah.
Their team is not playing with the puck a lot when they're on ice.
Exactly.
Not necessarily, but you definitely want to know.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. I wanted to talk about that because the more, what we see is the more a team has failed possession plays, meaning failed passes, failed dekes, missed shots, the more loose puck recoveries they're going to have, right? So there's a good part of that, which means maybe there's good puck support, which we can dig in also a little bit deeper. But it also could just mean that the reason why you're recovering the puck so much is because you're losing the puck a lot, or the puck is not, or you're not completing your plays very much. So again, it's all about balancing this information and not saying because he does this well, it means he's good, or because he does this poorly, it means he's bad. There's context, and context is really important.
And the context can also be used to break it down further, right? Yeah. The player's getting all of their dump-in recoveries, all their loose puck recoveries off, dump-ins in their own zone. Maybe that's just their role on a pairing, and that's just going to kind of only illustrate that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then the fifth pillar, overall possession rating.
Yeah, so overall possession rating, like we talked about, is just trying to show which players have the most impact in the game and the most positive impact in the game. And by positive impact, we're not talking about scoring chance, we're not talking about possession, driving, any of that. We're really talking about their impact on that team's ability to acquire and maintain puck possession. Simple as that. There's certain players who do that well, but not necessarily create offense. And there's players who do that well and create offense. There's players who do that well that are more defensive players as well. But it's really just about being able to measure a player's impact on that team's ability to acquire and maintain puck possession.
And we'll look at some rankings in that as well.
So I'll kind of go into the forward stuff. What we see a lot on the forward side year over year are some of the players that people think of as the top defensive forwards, right? So a player who usually is here, and I'm surprised he's not there, is year over year is Bergeron was year over year. There's one year where he was substantially above everybody else. There was actually a couple of years when he's that. So you're going to see players who have a reputation of having strong sticks, players who have a reputation of getting the loose pucks. Yeah, those are the guys you're going to spot here. And obviously, what's really cool is when you see a player that's on that list that also is high on your OGP or offense generating plays. That's a sign of a really good player. And that leads us into what I was talking about before in terms of those 5 pillar players, right? If you're looking at a player who's a 5 pillar player and he hits on all 5, let's say if you're looking at a player that you want to draft or player you want to acquire, there's a good chance that even if he hits on three of those 5 pillars, he's going to be an upgrade for your team, right? If he hits on 4, if he hits on 5. The danger in looking at players that are just 2 pillar players is obviously it's either they're going to hit on it or they're not going to hit on it. And it's also important to remember that when you're acquiring players or when you're bringing players over, there's one person or a group of people who are going to be judging whether that player gets played, and that's going to be the coach. So if you can give a coach a player that hits on more than 1 pillar, they're more likely to use them, right? If he only has 2 pillars and one of them is that he drives possession, but he doesn't create any offense, he doesn't engage defensively, he doesn't close on players, and obviously that player is just not going to get the ice time. So whether or not he's a great producer of offense or his OGPs are through the roof, he's not going to get played because he doesn't do other things well.
Those Swiss Army knife type players coaches talk about.
Exactly.
Before I jump to the next slide, one of the things that we're extremely lucky to have access to is the same data for other leagues.
Yeah.
So the exact same events that go into the NHL data system, the collection of data, the exact same rules, all the same events go into the AHL, the WHL, OHL, QMJHL, USHL. So we'll show you some quick rankings for offense generating plays at the AHL level.
Yeah, so this is really looking at, like we talked about, not the best, but the top producers of offense or top producers of pucks to the middle, getting shots on net from the slot, so on and so forth in the American Hockey League. So it's important to look at that. And obviously, we have certain thresholds that we try to mark it off of what constitutes, a top line guy in terms of each of these things. And that threshold slides or moves up depending on the level of the league, right? Mm-hmm. So what you're looking at, a guy who could be in a top 6 forward at the American Hockey League, that threshold of his OGPs or offense generating plays is going to have to be a little bit higher for you to think that would be able to be transferable or when they move to the NHL, similarly to with defensemen as well. But it's an interesting list, especially when you start looking when we look at these lists and then we start putting cutoffs, this list is good, so you don't necessarily have to do cutoffs. We start doing cutoffs at age groups, and you kind of take away the 27-year-olds and the 26-year-olds in the A, and you start looking at those, those 21, 22, 23-year-olds, and they're at the top. It's definitely something that you want to look at.
Yeah, when we show you the junior numbers, we limit it to just the 2002 birthdays, so you can kind of get a sense of the draft eligibles. Yeah. And then similar for AHL, also possession driving plays, so defensemen and forwards who are just moving the puck up ice.
Yeah. So you see some guys that you would expect, obviously some Patan and some Pekka, just because you know that they're good skaters. There's also guys that you maybe don't see as those type of players, which are really interesting to see. And some guys who are young, that's really, really cool to see them on a list at the AHL level at that age.
Yeah, there's sometimes surprises at the defenseman level for PDPs. Yeah. Not because you think they're especially bad, but because they might be making one quick play constantly that you just never notice. Yeah. That's often the short outlet pass, but man, the effectiveness of that is it's good.
Yeah, and what's great too is when you look at lists like this and you see players that you were really high on 3 years ago that are on those lists, and you go, wow, look at that.
I know which one that is.
Pat yourself on the back.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, just the ego, right?
Yeah.
And then so we got major junior here. So we got forwards and defense. This is offense generating plays again. So this is just plays that move the puck to the middle of the ice and generate offense.
Yeah. So obviously Marco Rossi, number one there. You would not expect him to be anywhere else based on what he's doing. Lafreniere, he's a little bit lower, but that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just means that that's where he is. A lot of this stuff also, like we've talked about earlier, you have to take usage into account, strength of opposition. There's zone starts, so if they're a little bit lower, a little bit higher, that's going to impact that. Obviously, a player like Foudy, those guys, you would expect them to be there as well. There's some really interesting names there that maybe somebody wouldn't expect, but for the most part, these are strong names. When on the defensive side, obviously there's some defensemen that are really good. The defenseman at number 7, I don't think people necessarily realize yet. I think that's a nice slot for him, and to get a little bit of exposure of what kind of player he actually is, and also to see obviously number 6 too is a player that I've every time I've done my video work on him, I come away feeling good about him.
Yeah, and then same thing for possession driving plays. Some of the players show up again for forwards, Lafreniere, Foudy.
Yeah, when you look at Foudy, Jean-Luc at number 1, that's substantially higher than everybody else. It's head and shoulders higher than everybody else. I don't want to throw out numbers that confuse anybody, but we're looking at a guy who's pushing 30 possession driving plays, which when we're looking at, and our kind of a threshold for players that are carrying the puck well and good puck movers is 17 to 18. So when we look at a guy who's pushing 30, that's pretty impressive numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're probably going to want to, if you're scouting that player, is he always entering with control? Is he always exiting with control? Is he making those quick passes? Yeah. It's just something you can always dive into in your scouting. Even if you want to look at just specific skill at making a play, this is a great way to start. And then now, outperforming usage. This is the key, as you were mentioning.
Yeah, you want to jump in, or you?
Oh, this is your baby here.
Okay, so when you're evaluating a player, you want to use all the things we talked about earlier, and you want to, but always want the context, right? So you want to be able to know, are they producing more than an average player would with that usage? If you have enough of those players, or you have a choice between a player who is or isn't, you want to look at that player who is, obviously. So when we look at that, we're looking at where are they starting, obviously, O-zone starts, D-zone starts. We're looking at whether or not they're playing against good players or better offensive players than they are, or worse offensive players than they are, and their strength of teammates. And then we can also look at the differential between those two. So, for example, if a player is starting more often than not in the defensive zone, so he's around, let's say, 19-20% O-zone start percentage, right? And that O-zone start percentage includes the neutral zone, so that's why our number looks a little bit lower than you would expect when you see some of the public stuff. So if he's around that and he's playing against, think of it playing against better offensive players than he's playing with, let's say it's by -3 or -4, and he's still producing, let's say, top 6 level offense generating plays, or XGF, or whatever metric you want to use for that, obviously that's a player who's outproducing his usage. Similarly, if you look at a player who's starting 40% in the offensive zone, he's got +11 on his strength of opposition differential, and he's producing under, let's say, top 6 level OGPs, that's a player that maybe you wouldn't expect no matter what you do. you're not going to expect him to get better, to be able to produce more OGPs. And the more you find those players, the better you are. If you can find those players at the junior level, you're going to find players that other people just don't know about, because they're not going to be producing the points, because they just don't have the usage to produce those points. But if they get the usage, they are going to produce those points. And you see it when you look at players that, in their draft year, and then the next year when they're playing with better players or being used differently, then all of a sudden their point total starts coming around. Similarly, if you're doing this at the NHL level, and you're comparing two players that you want to trade with, and you have one player who's significantly outproducing his usage and one player who's not, and they're similar players in terms of their how you would want to use them on your team. They're similar players in terms of, let's say, some of the other underlying numbers, because we always want to look at those 5 pillars. Then obviously it makes you more likely to want to look at that other player that's overproducing his usage, rather than the player who's underproducing his usage.
If you know where your hole is in terms of, we need a player who can play in this type of usage, and then you find a player who's outperforming that specific type of usage, it tells you that they're going to slot into that role.
Exactly, because the teams that have success, especially offensively, are the teams that have as many of those guys who are producing OGPs, offense generating plays, at a top 6 level. So if you're a team like Vegas, who has 11 skaters who are producing that level of offense, then obviously that's a good thing, and that helps you produce your offense. It's just, there's a nice little link between those two things in terms of success offensively.
Absolutely. One thing you can do when you have a huge collection of metrics that are really, really detailed, and you can't mentally consider every single one, is you can combine them into archetypes. And you can do that at multiple levels. You can make, your D-zone outlet passes and your stretch passes is your D-zone puck moving ability. You can combine that with neutral zone plays and O-zone plays to create an even larger archetype. For instance, puck moving D, simply just doing well in metrics in which the player moves the puck up ice. Just ranking by percentile will give you an idea. This is a better player than this player at this metric. And you can even take these archetypes and then combine them even further. So say you want to combine puck moving D and power play quarterback into an offensive defenseman archetype, or something similar for offensive forward or defensive forward. I'll show you some examples. These are archetypes that we have, and they're made up of a collection of metrics, which themselves are made up of collections of metrics, and they're weighed by importance and such like that. And then you can quickly just rank players by how good of an offensive forward they are, and these are players near the top.
Yeah, this is where we get into when you're let's say if you're working for a team, or you're an analyst for a team, or you're trying to communicate stuff, you're the translator of information, right? If you just hand a spreadsheet with all this information on it, it's less likely to get any kind of pickup by the coach or by whoever you're talking to, because they're just not going to understand it, right? What we're doing now is we're taking that data and turning it into hockey language, right? We're looking at that data, combining it, creating archetypes that focus on certain types of players and sit in certain chairs, as a lot of people like to use, right? So that's kind of what this whole process is. This doesn't mean that this is the be all end all. It's just a way of communicating the data, and that's what we're always trying to do, is being that translator of, we have data, we want it to become information, and the only way for data to become information is for it to be understanding, and that's what the goal of this is.
This is really a first step, because like I said, you can break this down into its components. You show this to a coach and they say, well, what makes him a good offensive forward? You can tell the coach it's because of his passing, it's because of his power play production, it's because of his possession driving. A good defensive forward or a power forward, what makes them a good power forward? It's because the recovery's in front of the net, it's because of their loose puck battle, win percentage, all these things that go into it.
Awesome.
And then kind of show you some defensive examples again. So a lot of the offensive defensemen who show up here are players who had a lot of OGPs.
Yeah.
That's kind of a type of metric that goes into it. And on the defensive defense side, the same player we were talking about. Yeah. This is where you expect them to show up. Yeah.
And this is also one of those ones where you want to, it's set up that we're trying to limit that kind of bias for guys who spend too much time in the defensive zone, but that will always kind of show up a little bit sometimes. So you always want to have that in your mind. Is this guy showing up as a top defensive defenseman just because of the rate, the number of touches or defensive plays or kills or blocks that he's doing in a defensive zone? So you want to always balance that and always keep the context and making sure that you're using other metrics to cross-check against other metrics.
And it's easy for us to do because everything is linked right to video.
Yeah.
So when I'm looking at, say I'm using these archetypes or just a metric in general, and I see a player ranks highly in their control entry success rate, and I think that doesn't necessarily line up with what I think, or that exactly lines up with what I think, but I kind of want to see it, you're a click away from looking at all of their entries, and you can look at just their successful entries, their failed entries, and the speed at which you can link video to the metrics makes the analysis just I don't want to say effortless, but really it's so nice.
Yeah, I mean, what great. One of the things that I like to do, obviously, is for defensemen, like I mentioned earlier, I like to look at entries against, and I'll just put those on a 4-second loop. So I'm looking at every 4 seconds, another one is popping up. So I can run through. Obviously, we can do the math, but I can run through a lot of those videos over and over, those clips in a short amount of time. Be able to get a good feel of the players, and it also allows you. The mind works well when you're focused on one thing, and by looking at it this way, you really just, rather than looking at a full shift, you're really just focusing on this one aspect. And you can do this for anything. Obviously, you can just do this for passes to the slot from below the circle when that defenseman is on the ice, right? And then you can start seeing, whether or not what if there's any issue in terms of his communication skills or his ability to lock down lanes and so on and so forth.
And like you said, when you're watching it back to back to back, when you see 10 or 20 or 30 in a row, you're going to see things that you wouldn't see when they're distributed over the course of 5 games or 6 games or whatever it is. The patterns become much more obvious, and they just match the metrics.
Yeah, exactly. And you'd be able to do that. And as Matt mentioned, you can do this. You're not just looking at one game. You can do them over multiple games. When you create playlists, you can even start making it so that you're looking at different games and kind of changing it so you're not locked in to looking at a player over this particular span. You can maybe have a little bit of this part of a season, a little bit of this part of the season, a little bit of this part of the season.
Yeah, that is the end of our player analysis section. We'll just kind of briefly talk about some other things, what's on the horizon.
Yeah. So obviously, one of our technology, we didn't really get too much into the technology, but our technology allows us to look at players, obviously, and that could be tracking an event. So one of the things, obviously, we can do with 3D body poses is have obviously where the player is on the ice, also, but we can also show what his hands are doing, what his arms are doing, what his legs are doing, and what his stick is doing, and with that. There's a lot more information we can get. Obviously, there's the real-time event data because we have the stick and we're able to show exactly what each player is doing, which is there. But looking even further than that, you can look at player speed, but digging in a little bit deeper, you're not just looking at a player speed. You can look at their stride. So how many strides to top speed? How many strides are they making? So we're looking at load management stuff, right? Player load management comes from this. When you're looking at a goalie, right? If you're looking at goalie load management, how many ups and downs? How much is he moving? This is really interesting and cool stuff. And I think this is the next phase of what we're trying to get to in terms of being able to look at players and evaluate players, not just what they're doing, but also how they're doing it, how they're moving. And from there, obviously, the defensive side pops up too with the tracking where you know where all the players are on the ice. There's a lot of really cool, interesting things. A great example is, let's say, on a team forecheck, right? Yeah. You want to look at, the weak side winger, what is the weak side winger doing when there's a rim dump, and you can do that over and over a whole span of things. Impacts over time, impact, and when I say impact, it could be impact on the hit, right? So if a player is getting hit, because we have the body pose, we actually know where the player is getting hit. So was it a headshot? Is he getting hit in the head? Is he not getting hit in the head? How many times is this player over the course of the year getting hit on his right shoulder or left shoulder? Let's say there's an injury. We can look at that. Anything to the knees, obviously that's going to happen. And a huge thing, obviously, and I mentioned it before, but I think it's worth mentioning again, is just overall load management, specifically for goalies. A goalie how many up and downs, how many times is he moving? Is he moving unnecessary? Is he just moving for the sake of moving without having, and maybe there's something there in terms of just load management.
Directionality thing, is it a certain play that's making him do that? Yeah,
and even looking at his ability to square up. There's a lot of stuff that we can come from that. We're just touching upon a little bit, but I think it's the future is really, really exciting when we work through the body pose stuff.
And the combination, bringing everything together, the event data, the player tracking, the body pose, that's what gives you the ability to say, is our forecheck playing tight? What is our gap on our forecheck? On the penalty kill, is our shape expansive? Are we anticipatory? Are we just reacting? Are we playing too far in this direction? Are we being pulled off when there's chaos? It's really combining all these things into one that really gives you this insight.
Yeah, and that's how you eliminate any blind spots, right? If you just have tracking and you have no events, there's blind spots. You don't know who's doing what necessarily. And to be able to get that information, you're going to have to come up with some alternative way. If you just have the event without the tracking, obviously you're missing some of the tracking stuff. So the only way to clear up all of those blind spots, the only way is to combine the tracking, the events, and the body post. And that's where you get that's where we're going to get a full picture of, obviously at the team level and at the player level. in hockey.
Yeah. That's the end of the presentation. I think it's Q&A time.
Sure, let's go.
This is where we find out if anyone was actually listening. Just give us 1 second here. I'm going to stop the share and then hit this. Okay, so we've been getting questions for the last hour.
Okay.
Should we start at the top and then just go through everything?
Yeah, we'll try to do our best.
Should I unmute myself? Can you guys hear me? Are we having issues here? I'm gonna just unmute myself. Oh no, never mind. I think we're good. So first question. Can you break down how you physically capture the data? The tricky one.
Yeah, that's unfortunately there's certain things that that's proprietary, and as a business you just can't share in a public forum. But anybody who's interested in this can reach out to us otherwise, but yeah, it's just not something necessarily we can share in a public forum to get too deep in it. And my worry is that even if I go a little bit down that rabbit hole, we might go too far. So yeah, unfortunately we can't get into how the data necessarily is produced.
Yeah. Scroll down the question. Is it automated? I think that's kind of more the same question. Yeah. The webinar has started. What role does physics-based data play? Will there be a point where the player's physical outputs and abilities are directly measured? Is that already possible? Or are resultant stats such as speed of the shot, acceleration, top skating speed, more relevant sufficient?
The answer is yeah, this is something that we can do and we are doing. That's the stuff the body pose is going to be able to push to us. So to answer your question, yeah, absolutely. This is data that we currently can produce and do. So yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Does goalie positioning get taken into account? I think maybe you're talking about our expected goal model. In our existing model right now, the philosophy is once you get to the shot attempt, that's all we're trying to capture. Yep. And everything after that is what happens. Yep. But there are other philosophical opinions in which you could look into the goalie position. So if the goalie's out of position, if say you have a seam pass that created the goalie to be out of position, we can track with tracking the goalie position and feed that into the expected goal model, and it will do a better job at predicting future goals, but you're losing how well you're actually capturing the chance creation.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a philosophical thing. It could be. We're looking into it, so we'll see what we get out of there.
Yeah, exactly. And once you start doing that, you get into a position where you're trying to capture different information, and you're inconsistent in how you're doing it. I'm not sure if I'm explaining it really well, but I think Matt did a better job than I'm even doing. If you're trying to evaluate the shot itself, taking where the goalie is positioned, and that's going to have a negative impact on the shot value of the shot, just because that goalie was in good position, because we don't know, maybe it was just luck, or maybe maybe it had fallen down before, whatever it might be.
Smith
then that's going to impact that. So it's, again, it is a philosophical thing, and something that there's debate. But yeah, so I think that's where we're at with that.
Do you have XG values for block shots, since the NHL doesn't record that data? Yeah, we have XG for all attempts. We've got two models. One is just for on net. It doesn't look at blocked or missed shots. And then we have another model that also looks at missed shots and blocked shots. And what you expect is all the values tend to come down slightly for the all attempts model, so that the overall prediction still works the same.
Yeah.
But it depends on taste, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Scrolling down. What are some metrics scouts and GMs have expressed interest in when recruiting players?
It's the 5 pillars have a lot of traction around the league. So when we're looking at those, the offense entering plays, possession driving plays, obviously the stuff that we talked about with those 5 pillars, those are the things that teams are really excited about, and teams are using them for their current evaluation of players, and using them for their current evaluation of players for the trade market, for free agents, for scouting, for the draft. These are things that are being used as we speak by NHL teams. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Are there any pro teams that are reluctant about working with Sportlogic? How do you convince them otherwise? Well, there are 2.
There are 2. Full disclosure, the teams that we're not working with are more about budget than about other things. That might be giving too much information, but that's the truth. It really is more about budget than about not wanting the data, or not needing the data, or not thinking that they can use the data. But obviously, what they would like us to do is to give it away, for free. But that's obviously not something that's realistic. We have other customers that we need to be loyal to, and make sure that we're consistent in our pricing.
Exactly. Scrolling down, Can a player have multiple archetypes? Yeah, every player has, you can look at their archetypes. So every forward, you can look at them as an offensive forward, defensive forward, or a power forward, or break that down further. And then defensemen have their own archetypes that are similar, but, geared towards defensemen. So a player who is a very, very good offensive forward is sometimes not a very good defensive forward. Can you believe that might happen sometimes?
Yeah, sometimes.
You could be a great power forward, but you can't really generate offense in any other way.
Yeah.
So you might not be a great overall offensive forward. So everyone has a rating. There are some players that are elite at everything, but those are the rare ones, and you're not really going to find them.
So archetypes exist for all players. It's just, and that's how we kind of try to evaluate their strength within those archetypes.
Yep. Hearing 200-foot player all the time, has there been a demand, ability, and in your opinion, value in seeing where a player is positioned during the entire game? I'll say yes, just quickly. Or does the extensive data we already use give us a sufficient example of offensive and defensive awareness? Yes and no. It can. Obviously, knowing the position of all players at all times would be a huge advantage. Watching my first live game in 2 years a few weeks ago, I'm amazed at how much we do not see on a broadcast with the entire ice surface not shown. That's very true. Think about like a controlled D-zone breakout, the routes that players are taking through the neutral zone or high in their D-zone or waiting at the O-zone blue line. We never see that.
And that'll impact how a team's going to defend. If there's a CBO, so controlled breakout by a team, and both wingers have flown and they're sitting around the offensive blue line, that's going to have an impact on how the team defending that controlled breakout are going to defend that. So that's information that's important for sure. Information, all that, any information we can get in terms of positioning, in terms of speed, in terms of directionality, always is always good and adds to the it's context, right? Any context that you can add that can clean up any of those blind spots, like I mentioned earlier. That's what we want. We want as much of that as possible.
And you really want to make it actionable. You want it to turn into a player does this, or they don't do this, or they do this. Okay, you don't want to get a huge spreadsheet of numbers where they were at all times, which is where a lot of tracking is at this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Glad you enjoyed the presentation, Ashok. It is working. Do you weigh the junior level data on strength of league and competition? We don't really need to at our level, because right now what we're doing at the junior level is we're capturing everything. And when you capture every game, every possession play, you can just rank within that.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you know that a player's percentile performance of, say, OGPs is top of their class, it's going to translate more likely to the NHL. Same idea.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what you want to do. And I understand, and I think what you're trying to say is, can you start looking at players and showing them what they're going to do at the NHL level? And that is the goal. But you can't do that until you have a sufficient data set season over season. And that's what we're trying to build up, right? If we had information all the way back to when Crosby was drafted, and then we can start comparing those players against Crosby at the same level against the same strength of opposition, then you can start looking at that and being able to kind of say, okay, this player is like that player. But because we don't have enough seasons of the data, it's just too soon to make that kind of determination. That's the goal, though. That's what we want to be able to do. We want to be able to do that not just for that purpose, but also just to be able to see how a player progresses over age curves, how a player produces here based and how he's able to make the next jump, like you were mentioning. Mm-hmm. This is all stuff that we need, but the only way to do that is to have the data, and that's what we're working toward.
Yep, we just need more years.
More years.
Is XGA still one of the best statistical, not film-based measure defense? There are many measures of defense. It's the best overall idea of what you're allowing when on ice. It's a when on ice metric, so it doesn't necessarily tell you what the player is involved in. Over the course of many games, many minutes played, it's not going to really lie to you. If you're on ice all that time, it's probably going to have some correlation with your defensive ability, but it doesn't explicitly say you were responsible for this chance against, you missed your mark here, you missed your coverage here, you should have had this lane covered. Yeah. That's why we have all the defensive play stuff. So block shots, block passes, puck coverage in the corner, puck battle win percent, clears, all that stuff. And as Chris mentioned more than once or twice, having a lot of those plays doesn't necessarily automatically mean you're a great D-zone player if you're playing a lot in your own zone. But if you weigh all this information, XGA together with the defensive plays and percent of time spent in your zone, you're going to get a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. It's a big part of that equation, but it's a huge part of determining whether or not a player. And I think best way to answer that question too, or maybe not the best way, but another way is to say it's better than what else is there, right? It's better than arbitrarily looking at when a player you think is at fault on a scoring chance against, or whether or goals against, which is something that or plus minus. Obviously, this is a much stronger determination of a player's ability to defend, and then obviously, like with anything, and Matt mentioned it as well, is just you want to have the context. Who's he playing with? Who's he playing against? Where is he starting? And is he killing plays? You got to combine all that stuff. That's where the strength of this information comes. So when you start combining different metrics and different event data to find the answer that you're looking for.
Yep.
You know what? Let's do a couple more questions.
All right. Continuing on. That was the last question.
Oh, it was the last question. So let's not do a couple more questions.
Perfect timing.
I was enjoying the questions, actually. It was fun. Yeah. So just thanks. I mean, hopefully I realize we do, just to full disclosure, we realize this isn't for everybody. This doesn't fit everybody's idea of what they want to get from us, but obviously that's difficult for us to determine because everybody is expecting different. Our goal was to give as much as we possibly could and try to hit as many kind of potential viewers as possible. Hopefully we did that, and hopefully we can do this again.
Yep. If you do have access to our data and you're confident in your models and you don't think that you need any of the stuff that we had to speak about, then absolutely the power is in the data. It's really how you use it. But for those who really kind of want to get started or are looking for the next step, that's what this was for.
And those of you out there who obviously already have access to us and already have some of the data, as per usual, Matt and I are here to help with anything. Always. Reach out with any questions you may have. There are no dumb questions. There really aren't. There's no judgment on any questions. We're just here to help and try to make as much of this as tangible and understandable as possible.
Exactly.
And actionable.
So that's it, guys.
Thanks. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for watching.